Hello, everyone. Today we're going to have some fun. This is an article that a friend shared with me a while ago. I think probably a couple months ago, I guess. Probably about the time it was written, March 26th. And this is 10 problems that are slowly ruining Star Wars. I read this article at the time it was sent to me, and I had some agreements, some disagreements, etc. And I figured it'd be fun to go over this. And I was going to do it much, much earlier than I have now, but here we are. Let's go. A lot of you seem to think I know something about Star Wars, so why not explore and see what they have to say? So the premise is there are 10 things that are ruining Star Wars, and this person's going to go through and list them all. I'll give you a synopsis of each one as we go, blah blah blah, read the article a little bit, and then give you my rebuttals. So number 10, nostalgia. Now let's hear it. The Force Awakens was anything but original, borrowing numerous concepts from the original trilogy, including the basic structure of its own story. The film also pandered considerably to nostalgia crowds, referencing aspects of the original trilogy constantly and alluding to the most memorable moments from yesteryear. Here's the contentious opinion for you. The Force Awakens should have ditched the majority of the original cast, including Han Solo, Chewbacca, Admiral Leia. Was she an admiral in that? I thought she was general. Anyways, and C-3PO, focusing instead on the newer characters. Understandably, the filmmakers were concerned about bridging the gap between the old and new, but dedicating so much of the film to these older characters seems somewhat counterproductive, serving only to satiate audiences with nostalgic inclinations. It goes on to talk about Star Trek, etc., blah, blah, blah. Now, I agree with this. I think nostalgia is killing it. I think The Force Awakens should have been set 300 years after the Battle of Yavin. Not 30-something years, but 300 years after the Battle of Yavin, or however long it was. And the reason why I think this, I didn't think this originally, but this came about after I did some talking with other Star Wars fans, and I think it would have been a wonderful way to do it. Have the old canon be myths, be legends. The Battle of Yavin is so far in the past that it is a legend. Luke Skywalker is a legend. Han Solo, Leia, they're all legends. They don't exist in this world anymore. They're all dead. They're all long dead. The Jedi have done whatever they've done. The Sith have done whatever they've done. And you have a whole new world to work with. That I agree with. However, I also disagree with it to a degree because Rogue One was a huge pandering to nostalgia, and it was amazing. It showed what they can do with this. So I agree and disagree. I don't think nostalgia is killing it. I think nostalgia is killing the new material. There's cases like Rogue One and to some degree Rebels where nostalgia is keeping it alive. There's other cases like the new episodes where nostalgia is just fucking it up and they shouldn't have done what they're doing. They shouldn't have brought back the old characters. It was just too far gone. They should have jumped ahead and done a new saga. It would have been much better. Next one. The expanded universe. Oh dear. When it comes to the coherent world, Star Wars can sometimes be lacking in terms of depth, a problem that should have been corrected somewhat by the expanded universe. Unfortunately, the EU is completely nonsense, actively ruining several important details of the original trilogy. According to the book, Boba Fett somehow managed to survive his fall into the Sarlacc pit. For instance, in fact, George Lucas himself confirmed this canonical revision, undermining one of the greatest sequences in the entire trilogy. And they go on to talk about how Disney's trying to rectify the problem, etc. Now, this is bullshit. The expanded universe saved Star Wars. Star Wars was kind of, it hadn't died, but up until the 90s, it was just kind of there. There wasn't a whole lot to hold together. The EU really took off in the 90s, and that's what brought in a lot of people like myself. My generation of fans got into it because of the special editions and the blossoming EU. So the idea that the EU killed it? No. I mean, granted, I agree with the article here when it says that the article basically says the EU is shit and silly. And I agree. There are parts of the EU which are silly, but, the EU gave Star Wars depth. It gave Star Wars a much wider world. It gave us so much to work with and such a wide, broad scope of things. It's wonderful. So the fact this guy saying that the EU killed it, no. Is killing it? No. What is killing it, in this regard, is Disney's denial of the EU. That is what's killing it. It has created a massive divide with the fans. There's fans who love the EU and hate the new stuff. There's fans that love the EU and love the new stuff and are kind of torn. And there's fans that hate the EU and love the new stuff. Disney created a massive divide. Disney fucked up. They instead of embracing Star Wars as it was, they chopped it in half, and now everyone's kind of on either side of it, looking at across it like that over. It's like Trump, not my president. Well, no, in this case, it's not my Star Wars. That's a thing. I've heard that be said. Not my Star Wars. Oh God. And just like with the United States, this shit has divided the Star Wars canon, unfortunately. And it was in my opinion, it's a major fuck up of Disney. Disney really cocked that up. George Lucas, oh dear. Filmmaking is a collaborative process, but there are so many individuals who deserve more recognition for their contributions to the actualization of Star Wars. In fact, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi were directed by Irwin Kershner and Richard Marquand, respectively, and Lawrence Kasdan, who was responsible for writing the screenplay in both cases. In fairness, George Lucas was responsible for kickstarting the first film, but its success can be attributed almost entirely to Gary Kurtz. A producer took on several directing responsibilities, including instructing the actors in regards to their performance in the movie. Now this, I don't have much to say about this. I don't agree that he's killing it. In fact, Lucas has actually, honestly, since handing over the reins to Disney, Lucas has been relatively hands-off. I don't know. I have seen the original idea Lucas had in comic form, and it's an interesting story, but it's very different from what we know as Star Wars, so I don't really have much to say about this one. This one I'm like, yeah. But again, Lucas isn't really involved in Star Wars anymore. He's kind of taking hands off. He's doing his own thing. So I don't really think that, Franchise fatigue. Oh, and they have the Last Jedi thing now. This might be a subjective point. I think a lot of this has been subjective, actually. But a good story should have an ending. It doesn't have to be a satisfying ending, and it certainly doesn't need to qualify as a happy ending. But an ending creates a much-needed sense of closure and resolution. Unfortunately, Star Wars is currently being milked into oblivion. Numerous side projects lingering ominously on the horizon, such as a standalone Han Solo movie, Boba Fett Origins Story, and another prequel starring Obi-Wan Kenobi. I hope so. There's also episode 8 and 9, two sequels being directed by Rian Johnson and Colin Trevorrow, which will further extend the life of the series, accentuated by the inevitability of 10, 11, and 12. Oh God. And this is true. Disney is going to milk this thing into the ground. Disney is going to milk Star Wars into the ground. And that's the same thing they're doing with Marvel. They're doing the exact same thing with Marvel. The first few Marvel movies were awesome, and now it's kind of just become routine. Everyone's like, oh look, the next Marvel movie. Clap, clap, clap. And that is going to happen with Star Wars. Disney does that. Disney milks shit. They always milk shit, whether it's their own IPs or someone else's. They milk stuff until it's dead, and they use the bone marrow to keep on at it. So that is a real threat, honestly. Oh, come on. Load, damn you. My internet's good. Ish. Mostly. Come on. You can do it! Or not. Number 6, merchandising. Since '77, Star Wars has been merchandised to death. Every iconic image plastered over milk cartons, and cereals turned into everything from lunchboxes to tape dispensers. As a result, the films are generally difficult to distinguish from their marketing. The vast majority of characters, creatures, and settings gradually cheapened and turned into mere products themselves. I disagree. I mean, the marketing honestly has made a lot of things kind of awesome. It's gotten a lot of things. I mean, you see Darth Vader at Disneyland, or you see people at a fencing, Olympic level fencing tournament dressed up as Jedi and Sith dueling, and people are like, "Yay!" You get excited for Star Wars. People. The merchandising doesn't necessarily turn people off. It gets people excited. I think this person just doesn't understand that. I think I kind of question whether or not this person's an actual Star Wars fan, because I go to a Comic-Con or an anime expo or anything like that, and I see Star Wars stuff. I'm like, oh, cool, awesome, Star Wars. And yes, is Star Wars everywhere? Yes, it is. It's been everywhere since I was a little kid. And I haven't gotten tired of it. Even goofy stuff that I see, I'm like, oh, neat, Star Wars. I mean, we had a Star Wars day at work, and sure, some of the stuff was goofy as shit. But at the same time, it was cool to see Star Wars stuff. So the merchandising thing, I don't agree with. I think merchandising, it comes with every IP. Every IP has merchandising. Star Wars just happens to be one of the most ubiquitous merchandising schemes ever. The Force, oh no. The laws of cause and effect are vital components in the construction of a story. Every aspect of a narrative needing to be established, as well as justified. In Star Wars, the Force functions as a supreme deus ex machina, which is true, solving virtually any problem in the script instantaneously and with relative ease. If a character needs to be made aware of something, the Force can give them a vision. If a character is trapped, the Force can present them with a means of escape. You forgot to capitalize the Force there, dude. Shame on you. And if a character is oblivious to something, the Force can be blamed for clouding his judgment. Blah, blah, blah. Sure, yes, but, the Force has been a thing since the very first Star Wars. It's always been a thing. That is what makes Star Wars Star Wars. It's an intrinsic thing in there. The only time I would say the Force killed anything was when they tried to do midichlorians. Midichlorians were a real clusterfuck. It's like, well, you didn't need that. Why is that there? You didn't know. That was silly. But is the Force killing Star Wars? No, not really. It's just part of Star Wars. Granted, I do think that in the new canon, they've gotten a bit silly with the Force. The Force has gotten really out of hand in some cases, which is unfortunate. Like the whole... There's a lot in the new canon they've been doing with the Force. They've made the Force much more magical than it used to be. Granted, you can make the argument that it's always been kind of magical, which is, true. It is the magic of Star Wars, after all. But they've made it really, really magical in the new canon in some cases, where it's just like, what is that? But oh well. Re-edits. Undergoing some serious cosmetic changes over the years, the original trilogy is now virtually unrecognizable, the numerous improvements tarnishing the overall impression of the trilogy. In most cases, the changes have been largely pointless, but others have actively contradicted the larger themes of the movies. For instance, Greedo firing first actively opposes the characterization of Han Solo, that is true, who previously required little justification for murdering an adversary in cold blood. I agree with that. That part I agree with. I think. Now, granted, I'm glad they did what they did at the special edition. I don't agree universally with what they did. I think there are some parts of the special edition where it was like, why did you do that? What the hell does that serve? But overall, I'm glad they made the special edition. The Han Solo shooting first thing is one of the few things where I'm like, that was bad, that was stupid. But honestly, there's nothing else in the special edition that I complain about. I like the rest of the special edition. I might be alone in that, but I don't think that's a problem. I do think that Lucas went back way too much and changed too much as time went on. He just got overhand. The special edition should have been a one-time thing and then stop, instead of just constantly going back and changing stuff as more material became available, because that got really out of hand. It was very, very silly. Poor conclusions. Return of the Jedi was a disappointing conclusion. Disagree, and was easily the weakest entry in the original trilogy. Also disagree. Following an extended opening sequence in Jabba's palace, the film quickly descends into tedium. The final confrontation between the Empire and the Rebellion reduced to an elongated skirmish in the woods, starring small furry monkeys armed with nothing but rocks, spears, and sheer determination. I like the ending of Return of the Jedi personally. The Emperor is dead. They've won a major victory. Darth Vader's been defeated. The characters are looking at a brighter future. It's true. It's not resolved. There is no ultimate resolution. The Empire is still a threat. The Empire has not been defeated in this one battle. Anyone who's known anything about the Empire or had the scope of the Empire knows that this did not defeat the Empire, but it damaged it. It was a major blow to the Empire. It emboldened planets to join the Rebel Alliance, which became the New Republic, etc. And the end, if we're just concentrating on the movie itself, the ending of the movie, The Return of the Jedi, was a symbol of hope, I would say. Rebellions are built on hope. No, not what I mean. I mean, it's hope for a better future. It ends on this note of there is hope out there. There's we've won this victory. It's bought us breathing room. There's more to do. And I think that was always the point. I think that was Lucas's point with that, was that he wanted to establish this isn't the end. This isn't the end of Star Wars. There is more to do. There is more we can do, etc. So I don't think that he's right here, honestly. I think he's being too short-sighted. Retreading old ground. Oh dear. This is basically nostalgia again, isn't it? Released last year, The Force Awakens is a critical and commercial success and one of the highest-grossing films ever made. Oops. Directed by J.J. Abrams, spoken Jar Jar Abrams, the film got a great many things right, including the tone, which the prequels had completely squandered. No. Introducing a handful of new characters and seamlessly blending everything together. Again, no. It's primarily an adventure film that did away with the space politics in favor of genuine thrills and excitement, and I think that's part of the problem, honestly. That being said, The Force Awakens borrowed extensively from the original trilogy, so much so that the film is essentially just a remake of the first film. Yes, in both cases, an inexperienced, wide-eyed youth abandoned on a desert planet and forced to remain out of obligation is forced to enter the galactic picture, transporting a droid containing vital information to the rebellion and containing a sinister organization with villainous intentions. Yes, I do agree with that. That it's just like we've seen this story before. Tell us a new story. There are tons of stories to be told in Star Wars. That's the fun with Star Wars. You can do any story you want. My own writing reflects that. You can tell a dozen different stories in Star Wars. You can make stuff new and exciting, etc., and it works. What they did with Force Awakens, it was a repeat. We'd seen it before. We'd read it before. There are stories that mirror A New Hope already. This was just another one of them, and it was unfortunate. Honestly, kind of a travesty, if you ask me. But, And he's talking about did away with the space politics in favor of genuine thrills and excitement. I like the space politics. I like the politics of the original trilogy. The idea that the Senate has been dissolved. They're combating this because etc. etc. Or the prequels where it was like politics played a part in all that. There was a very big amount of politicking, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that nuance to it. And you can make the claim that it made it boring for some people because not everyone enjoys politics, but I do enjoy that. For me, that's not a problem. For someone else, maybe it is, but the retreading old ground, yeah, I agree. The retreading, something like Star Wars, you don't have to retread. There's always new material you can go over. The only retreading you should ever do in Star Wars is the vanilla formula of Jedi and Sith. That's always going to be a thing in Star Wars, unless you just avoid that entirely and go in a completely new direction, such as what they did in Rogue One, where it was like, the Jedi and Sith aren't involved here. They're referenced, but they're not really involved. It's their own thing. And you can do that, too, with Star Wars. So the fact that they just redid it, and they retreaded an already established story in Force Awakens pisses me off. And I'm hoping that in, 8 and 9, they put a little more effort into it and be a little more original, one can hope. Let's see. This is number 1? Yeah, number 1. The enduring legacy of the prequels. Of course they're bitching about the prequels. Oy. Prequels really have ruined absolutely everything about the franchise, from iconic imagery and core concepts to character backstories. At this point, it's difficult to appreciate the original trilogy without making certain connections with the prequels, the two no longer mutually exclusive. Phantom Menace made the mistake of rationalizing the Force, that I agree with, demystifying the otherwise supernatural energy into a quantifiable scientific measurement. It also turned the Jedi into a religious cult, introduced the world to Jar Jar Binks, and even made the suggestion that Darth Vader had actually created C-3PO as a child using scraps. And it goes on to critique each of the other ones. I'm just going to read these because these actually do bother me. Not to be outdone, Attack of the Clones somehow managed to ruin Stormtroopers and Boba Fett, suggesting that both were clones of the same bounty hunter, Jango. It also featured some of the worst dialogue ever uttered aloud, as well as some of the most awkward romancing ever captured on film, It even managed to ruin Yoda by turning the once sagacious master into an acrobatic ninja with superhuman speed and agility. Finally, Revenge of the Sith, perhaps the most deserving of blame, obliterated the origin story of the most iconic supervillain in cinematic history, turned Vader himself into a gullible chump. So we're going to go one by one here. Phantom Menace. I agree. It rationalized the Force. It shouldn't have done that. Jar Jar Binks, a terrible, terrible handling of a character. In fact, the Gungans as a whole were handled terribly. They could have been so much better. If you've read my Clone Wars project, you know what I would like to see the Gungans used as, how I think the Gungans should be portrayed. But that's neither here nor there. That's my portrayal, not their portrayal. The C-3PO thing, whatever. I mean, I don't really care about that, honestly. That's just, I do think it was unnecessary, but it didn't really hurt anything, in my opinion. It was kind of silly, but whatever. Attack of the Clones, ruined Stormtroopers and Boba Fett? No. Not really. I mean, if you don't know the difference between a standard Stormtrooper and a clone trooper, then you're an idiot. I'm sorry. There's plenty of information out there that establishes the difference between the two. And the fact that they're all clones, and Boba Fett is himself a clone created by Jango to fulfill a legacy, is kind of cool. it puts a lot of pressure on Boba. It makes Boba Fett have a certain psychology that you could they have the potential to explore. In fact, in the old canon, they actually did explore that on several occasions. In some of the books they explored after the Attack of the Clones had happened already. Um, they actually explored some of that pressure on Boba, that lingering feeling of having to live up to what his father wanted him to be. Now, Revenge of the Sith. Um, Obliterated the origin story of the most iconic supervillain in cinematic history? No, it did not. It did not. I remember when I was a little kid reading the Essential Guide to Star Wars. It talked about Darth Vader fighting Obi-Wan Kenobi on a volcano. That's been there the entire damn time. So if you're talking about that, then no, that has been there since I was a little kid, and I'm 29, which I'm sure I know for a fact there are older Star Wars fans. So if there was another origin story before that, then whatever. But that's again that's something that's been changed before as well. But in this case, I don't feel that did anything. I mean, and yes, turning Darth Vader himself into a gullible chump, Anakin was a gullible chump. That's the whole point of him. I mean, sure, in the original trilogy, we don't see that. We don't get to see him be a gullible chump and everything else. But there's that implication through what Obi-Wan says in the third movie when he's talking to Luke after Yoda passes away, and he's saying it's like your father was seduced, and that's what happens. Palpatine gets into Vader's head in Revenge of the Sith, and lures him away with etc., etc., etc. And we've all seen the movie. We know what happens. And I don't feel that movie made, like, if all the things that movie could have did, or not could have done but did, I don't think that was a major complaint, honestly, because we all knew how that happened in our mind. Even if we hadn't seen the film yet, we all kind of imagined how that happened. That the Emperor somehow got Anakin away from the Jedi Order and corrupted him, and that's what happened in the film. And I realized I missed a couple things, so I'm going to go back to episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Some of the worst dialogue ever uttered aloud. Yes, there was some terrible dialogue in that movie. And there's no getting around that. There was some awful dialogue in that movie, but, there was also some fun dialogue, honestly. Ruined Yoda? I don't think so. I do think it was a little ridiculous when the first time I saw it, and everyone was laughing, but at the same time, everyone was also cheering seeing Yoda fight Dooku. When I saw that movie in theaters, people were cheering. People were like, "Yeah, Yoda, kick his ass!" And they laughed when he came out, with his cane, like everyone was chuckling, like, "Oh God, what's Yoda gonna do?" But then Yoda was a badass, and everyone was just like, "Yes, get him!" And then immediately afterwards, Yoda's back to his cane, and everyone started laughing. I mean, it was fun. It was the kind of humor that it was a good humor. It made us. It was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. That was fun. Hooray!" So yeah, I don't know. Now, to sum this up, this whole 10 problems that are ruining Star Wars, I disagree. I think I'd say probably three, I'd say about a third of these I agree with, more or less. But most of them, I feel like this person, Richard Doricott, whoever he is, Doricott, I don't know, whoever he is, this gentleman doesn't really understand Star Wars. I'm reading this. He doesn't sound like a fan. He sounds like someone who's outside looking in and critiquing it, which is valid. You can do that. But to have the pretentiousness to say, these are 10 problems that are ruining Star Wars when you're not a fan, and again, he could be. Maybe he is a fan, and I'm reading this incorrectly, but from what I'm seeing of this, he doesn't. This article doesn't read like something a fan wrote. It reads like something that a critic wrote. So I could be wrong about that. But to me, a lot of this just doesn't sound valid. It sounds like someone complaining about things they didn't like personally, rather than things that are actually trashing the series. Because a lot of this stuff that he wrote was just like, what was the point of that? What? And he missed a lot. I think like his comments about the expanded universe, for example, I think misses the fact that Star Wars, the expanded universe kept Star Wars alive. Now, I do grant, at the end, when Disney was about to take over, the expanded universe was getting a little out of hand. They'd run out of steam. The expanded universe had kind of run its course, and they didn't know what to do with it. It had gotten kind of aimless. Specifically, after the Yuuzhan Vong War arc had ended, after that had ended, and the Darth Caedus thing had ended, after that, it really had run its course. It's like What are we gonna do now? And oh my god, you piece of junk, how dare you ruin my video like that? Stupid thing just popped up on my screen. But after the Yuuzhan Vong and the Darth Caedus arc, and some people can argue that those two arcs were also running out of steam, but I don't think so personally. But after those two arcs, it really did run out of steam. It's like, what else are you gonna do? So in that regard, sure, the expanded universe might be argued that it's ruining it. But look at what else is in the expanded universe. Look at the Old Republic stuff. Not just the Tales of the Jedi, which I love as a little kid. I love the Tales of the Jedi stuff. But the Old Republic stuff, the KOTOR, the Tor, that stuff galvanized the community. It was, it introduced us to this new era of Star Wars, which we hadn't dealt with before, which we hadn't touched before. There was this, 3,000 year gap, more than that actually, almost 4,000 years in some cases, where it's just like, we don't have anything. We know there's a history there. There is allusion to history there in other canon material, but there's nothing there really. And now they're exploring that. BioWare is exploring that. And it's unfortunate that Disney wiped all that, really, because BioWare was getting into gear, and they still are going. Hopefully they continue going, because what BioWare is doing with Star Wars, in my opinion, in the Old Republic, is more faithful and more truthful. More faithful and more true to what Star Wars is than anything that Disney is currently doing with its new material. Rogue One I don't count as new material because it's just retreading old ground. Same with Rebels. Rebels is retreading old ground. But like the new material, like The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, etc. We'll have to see how Last Jedi does this year, at the end of the year, how it does. But Force Awakens didn't do jack for Star Wars. It was like, okay, cool. Yay. Why didn't you just create an entirely new story? Why are we doing this again? And that's what I like about the Old Republic material, is that it's still Star Wars. This is still very much Star Wars. The Sith are there, the Jedi are there, the Republic's there. But it's new, it's different, it's nuanced, it has its own little twist. And that is what Disney should have done. Disney should have created a new thing which is still very much Star Wars. They're going to the same worlds. It's Tatooine, it's Coruscant, it's Ord Mantell. All these worlds that we know and love, the characters, the species that we're familiar with, the character tropes, I should say, the character tropes that we're familiar with. And they should have explored that. They should have expanded upon it. Whereas the Old Republic is not several thousand, but a few thousand years in the past. Disney should have gone 300 years or so in the future, where there was no material written. The furthest forward we go is 130 some years in the old canon. They should have gone double that, go 300 years in the future of Star Wars and explore that. Give us a new Star Wars. Give us a new sense of Star Wars. And they failed miserably. And I'm worried that because, as this thing specifies, and I agree with, Disney is going to milk Star Wars into the ground. That we're never going to see that kind of material again. There's never going to be that inventiveness that we're seeing with the Old Republic stuff. And that's unfortunate. But a lot of, watch the video. Never mind, don't watch the video. You already watched the video, but you get the idea. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have specific points you want to contest, comment. Please do. I invite you to. And I'll stop rambling now, and I hope you've enjoyed this and don't want to kill me too much for rambling on like this, and I am hungry. My dinner is over there. I'm going to eat it, enjoy it, and I hope all of you have had a pleasant weekend and continue to enjoy the remainder of it. Farewell, good luck, and thank you for listening. The article is going to be linked both in the video description and on my DeviantArt journal, so if you want to read it yourself in entirety, do so, and have a blast!